Hey guys, this is Alrighty Then with a video on how to stipple. I'm going to show you what a good setup looks like and how to make it easier for yourself. I've got these two firearms here that I'm going to go ahead and stipple. This one I've already done, and this one I used a broad tip on it, and I just went ahead and I did the raised areas. I didn't do any sanding or any prepping like that, just went ahead and started stippling, and let me tell you, the grip on this thing is incredible, quite fine. And I also did the finger holes here, which were not stippled at all. There was nothing there. It was just smooth plastic. So I'm just going to show you some techniques on how to do it and different things to look for. So a lot of people, what they're doing is they're using just a regular soldering iron or wood burning iron with a very fine tip, but you can use any tip that you want. And it's very uncomfortable when you're doing it with one of these, because you want to be perpendicular to the area that you're stippling. It's very important that you be perpendicular to maintain the same pattern. Now if you're using a broad tip, then you use it sideways like this. So again, depending on the tip that you're using will determine what technique you use. So because I am going to stipple this Glock here with a fine tip, what I did was I took my soldering iron, I polished the tip so that the plastic wouldn't tend to stick to it. I also made this extension handle, which will allow me to, when I'm ready to stipple, I can use two hands to steady myself, and like this I'll be able to do a much more accurate stippling pattern, and I'm a lot closer to the subject. So if you're stippling like this, your hand tends to wander, and if you've got the shakes, it's no good. So by making this little apparatus here, and all it was taking this little flex tube, and I just kind of taped it to it. So this is going to bring me closer to my subject matter, so that while I'm stippling, I can see what I'm doing and be a little bit closer and be a lot more steady. So that's a neat trick. Another trick is when you're stippling, in order to get the cord out of your way, when I used to airbrush, or I still do, but when I airbrush, I wrap the cord around my hand like this, okay? And this way it keeps the cord out of the way. And no matter where I go, the cord stays right there, and it doesn't bind. You don't have to worry about it getting stuck, because the last thing you want to do is you go to stipple and the cord gets stuck and it kind of acts like this, and it makes you mess up. Also, you can make your own elevation block. I just kind of put some tape on these pieces of foam, so when I'm stippling I can have my hand here with the material here, and that gives me a little bit more accurate, a lot nicer way to get to the areas that I need to stipple, a lot more accurate than just trying to freehand, because this is when you start making mistakes. You need the stability of the block to do that. And so you can either raise it, make it higher, however you want it in order. So you can cut this, customize it however you're going to use it at the time. Also, a nice light would be nice, and this one happens to have a magnifying glass, so you can see exactly what you're doing so you don't miss anything. This works rather well, so I kind of set it up like that, and then I put my thing right there, and I'm looking into it, and I can go ahead and do my, and let me tell you, with this it's so much more steady. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to bring the camera a little bit closer, and we're just going to practice on the inside of this outer box to show you different techniques that you can do to get a good stippling job. Alright, so give me a second. Also, a stand for your soldering iron would be nice so that you don't end up burning yourself. So here I'm going to go ahead and show you a couple techniques. Alright, so I have my hand elevated on this. I'm using the very fine tip, and you can either try to freehand align yourself, which is a little bit difficult to do, or you can use a piece of tape to kind of help you along. So here I'm just going to do, just dab it in real easy and just kind of follow the tape. And I'm trying to stay perpendicular to the material that I'm staying at, trying to do even strokes, even penetration all the way through. That's one way of getting a stippled line or a straight edge. Using the tape as an edge is really good, and it keeps you nice and steady. Okay, so that was just the edge. Now another way to do it, on some techniques what they've done is they actually do a little canal, and the way you do that is if you take the stippler, and if your tip ever gets dirty, you can just kind of jab it into that wood or something, a little sponge or something, and kind of clean it off a little bit. So another way that you could do it is I'm going to take the stippler and I'm going to run it along the edge of the tape. Okay, so now I've created a canal. So let's take a look at what that looks like when I remove the tape. So when you remove the tape, you have a nice little straight edge that's kind of raised, but not to worry, because we're going to take our razor blade, and with the razor blade you could trim the excess of that little lip off, just the outside edge, so that the outside edge is nice and smooth. And then on the inside part of it now, you can go ahead and do all your stippling, and that will give you a very well defined border. And now you can start stippling everywhere around it. Take your time with it, just go slow, try to do even. Don't jump around, try to be even, okay? Make it like fish scales. And you can see something is starting to happen here as I'm doing the stippling. So if you notice how nice and sharp this edge is versus this one that is very bumpy, but it's still straight, but it's not as sharp as that one. So depending on the technique that you're using, you can either run the stippler across the material and carve out your straight line, or you can just dab it in and then make a straight line. It all depends on what you want to do. So different techniques are, this is one of them, just the regular traditional stippling where you have a very fine point, which creates about 120 grit sandpaper feel, which is pretty nice. Or I've seen the tree pattern, which they're just random patterns and involve just running the stippler through the plastic and just random patterns, just like you would a tree. You can make a main stem and then branch out from there. And then you just kind of keep going just across it. And then you can have branches going in one direction, and then you can break it up by then having them going in the other direction. So here I'll become perpendicular to that side, and I'll do the same thing. Stippling is not very difficult, it's just patience. It takes a while. And the best thing to do is to practice on a piece of plastic like I'm doing, which is pretty consistent to the melting point of the Glock and all the other synthetic stock holsters. They're very consistent, very similar to this. So just get yourself a hard piece of plastic. So here's another pattern. Where's the light on there? Now with practice you can perfect it. You know, obviously this is just to kind of show you the different things that you can do. So I'm going to switch to a bigger soldering iron, so give me a second. So while I wait for my other soldering gun to heat up, I'm going to show you this one, which is, it's a wood burning one as well. Actually this is a stencil cutter, and when you're making stencils you can use this to cut the stencils. So I used to use this for my airbrushing because it's very fine tip and you can cut out your stencils with it, but you can also use it for stippling. And the cool thing about it is that the shaft is a lot shorter, which gives you a lot more stability. So you don't need to have that little rig that I did on the other one, but this one doesn't burn as hot. But then again, you don't need it to burn that hot anyway, because you're just doing the plastic, and it works very well. So for this one, again, you can use your other hand to stabilize yourself and also just kind of dab it in and do the same thing. I'm going to show you one weapon that I made, and this was using a broad tip. Okay, this stuff is real rough, and all I did was I followed the edge of the current. It had some diamond plate on it already, and I just kind of followed it. And this was my first try, so I just said, what the hell, let me just do it. So I did it, and it came out great. And it's really it makes such an, I dare you to rip this out of my hand. I mean, it is solid. It really grips very, very well. And then I also did the finger traps right here. So that's just an example of what I did. And on my Glock, I started on the back of it, and I just did this little edge right here. And I'm going to go ahead and just do these. And a lot of people are sanding them off and sanding these parts off, and they sand all of this off. But if you do it carefully, you really don't need to sand anything off. You can actually stipple right over this if you're very careful, and it will maintain the integrity of the weapon. You don't have to take away any material, so that way you don't weaken the walls. So to me, there's no need to grind it. It all depends on what look you're going for, but you know, like my mom says, every dog licks himself the best way he knows how. So I think my soldering iron should be warm enough now, so let's continue with the tutorial. So on this soldering iron, I went ahead and I put tape along the edge there because it was really getting hot. But this is just a regular broad tip, just a regular flat tip. And this is what I used to do my star. And the way I did that was, all I did was you have to think of fish scales, so you really want to maintain a pattern. You don't want to be bouncing around everywhere when you're doing these type of things, whether it's the alligator skin or the fish scales. You really want to be very consistent. And it's very hard to mess up, although it's not that hard, but it is kind of hard. You have to be, if you don't have any idea how to use any tools, you shouldn't be doing this. You should pay somebody to do it for you. But if you have any common sense to yourself and you can handle the tool pretty well, then I wouldn't worry about it too much. So here I'm going to show you that I'm just going to put the corner of it, just a corner in this one to do the round edge. So I'm just going to dab it in and just move over it, dab it in, move over it, dab it in, dab it in. And I'm just going to create like that. Just keep going, little by little. You can overlap them or put them right next to each other. And then what you do is you come in and now you go in between them. So you're going to go this other way and go in between everyone that you just did. Now this kind of stippling job takes less time because you're covering a lot more area as opposed to the little pinpoint. Another one that they've done is the alligator skin, where they just use the broad side of the soldering iron. So on this one, let me see if I can get the right view for you guys. We're going to use the broad side of it. So it gives you quite a big mark. Well, that doesn't look very good. But if you did the broad side of it, I think I need a little narrower tip. But the same thing applies. You can try with different corners, and again, I'm just doing fish scales every other alternating. And then the longer you hold it, the deeper it penetrates. But you just want to dab it. So if you're doing a gun stock, you might want to use something like this because it's a lot broader, because you have to cover a lot more area. And trust me, this stuff is rough. Let me show you what that looks like. So the pattern doesn't look that bad, but for a handgun, you might not want to use this because it's just very big. For a rifle stock, you could. These things, you could use it for a handgun. The little stippling, you could. This one, you could. The broader tips, more for a rifle stock. But essentially, this is how you do it. Just take your time and take a piece of plastic and just practice little by little and see how it works. I can also use the flat end of this if I wanted to as well, and that will create a different type of effect. So I'm just going to use the flat tip on it. Let me see how that works, where I can see what I'm doing here. It's the same thing. Let me see. So I've got that. Depending on what you want, just practice, get a technique, but always remember to maintain that pattern and maintain the same distance, the same pressure, so that you get an even pattern all the way through. All right, so this one was done with the very needle nose stippler. This one as well. This one was done with just a corner. You got to do is just touch it, make a little dot, and just keep going. And obviously keep the pattern the same. So good luck on your stippling endeavors. This was Alrighty Then. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and wait for the next video. Thank you.